So in this video, I'll be going through some of the basic use cases for NGINX API Connectivity Manager, or ACM in short. In this setup, I've already deployed ACM as a virtual machine, along with two API gateway instances running NGINX Plus, as well as a separate dev portal instance also running NGINX Plus. This is the landing page for NMS, or the NGINX Management Suite. When you log in, you should be able to see the modules that are currently installed. We will be focusing on ACM today. In ACM, there are two main sections here. The first one's on infrastructure, used to manage your API gateways and dev portal hosts, as well as any global policies that you might want to apply on all the APIs. The services is more for API teams to publish their APIs on the gateways as well as the dev portal. So in infrastructure, there's the concept of workspaces. A workspace is pretty much a logical separation for every team or a business unit to manage their own gateway instances within. I'll be creating a workspace called Team A. And in the workspace, you can create one or more environments. So you can think of it as having a development environment, a model environment, and a production environment. In this case, I'll create a model environment. And here we will be specifying some information about the API gateway clusters as well as the dev portal clusters. I'll give it a generic name for now and a host name. So this host name will be the host name that your API users will be navigating to in order to access the APIs in the back. And same thing with the dev portal. The host name here will be used by your API users to browse the dev portal to get the API documentation. Once the environment is created, we will now be presented with some curl commands, one for API gateway cluster and one for the dev portal cluster. This will be executed on your API gateway hosts as well as the dev portal hosts. What they would do is install the NGINX agents on those hosts, which would then connect them to ACM. So I'll log into my two API gateway virtual machines here and run the same curl command. And the second curl command will be on the dev portal host. So while those are running, I'll go back to ACM. You can see the three clusters created here. Each of the clusters will let you configure the listeners on them. If you want to do 443 with TLS enabled, or if you want to configure the policies, for example, in here you can see there are global policies such as the OIDC authentication, server-side and client-side TLS, all available for infrastructure team to configure. Once the script has run to completion, we should also see all the hosts that are currently registered under each of the cluster. In this case, we've got API Gateway 1 and 0. There's a third cluster here called Dev Portal Internal Cluster. This is created by ACM with this special host name. It's got the ACM prefix followed by your developer portal cluster hostname. This is used purely for internal communications between ACM and the dev portal. One thing that trips up a lot of people when deploying ACM is that they forget to create a DNS entry for this hostname. It should point to the dev portal host itself for the communications to work. With all this in place, the infrastructure is now ready. We can now switch over to the services section and see how the workflow works for API owners. We have the same concept, workspace concept in services. again, different teams will work in different workspaces. Within the workspace, you can publish API documentation as well as the API itself. Let's first look at the API documentation. I currently have an API, Open API spec called HTTP bin on version 1.0, and it's got a base path of this with a single endpoint currently. I can upload this API spec to ACM, and then I can define my API. To define my API, I first specify the backend service. In this case, I'll be using HTTP bin.org, which is a pretty handy service on the internet where you can test out a whole bunch of REST API calls and such. The API proxy will have this name, that's fine, and it will be using an API spec which I've uploaded earlier. We will also be selecting a host name for this API. This was created by the infrastructure team and will be the URL that the API clients use in order to access our API. The base path and the version of the APIs are automatically extracted from the Open API spec if you have them in there. The base path is coming from the service URL field and the version from the info version field. The last thing I want to do is to also publish the API to the developer portal, once again selecting the host name that was created by the infrastructure team. And just to finish this off, I want to make some changes to the API. I want my API to have the format of hostname / base path / version, which is what I've done here. And I want the API gateways to strip both the base path and the version before the request is proxied to the backend, which is http bin.org at this point. You can also configure a whole bunch of policies here. These are different from the ones you've seen in infrastructure. This is a per API policy. I will not make any changes at this point. Instead, I'll just hit save and publish. Once that's been published, we can quickly jump over to the dev portal. This is the default dev portal look. You can customize many of these things here, but the thing I want to focus on is the API section, where you're able to see basically a documentation of your API. This is fully derived from your Open API specification, which we uploaded earlier. Here you can see the different endpoints, the different parameters that your API takes in, as well as the expected responses here. There's also a URL here that we can use to directly access the API from the browser. And there you go. It was proxied to HTTP bin, and we got a response back. Another feature of the dev portal is the ability to try out API calls within the dev portal itself without having to do this API call separately. To enable that, we need to configure OIDC policy for the dev portal, as well as to publish an API with the API key policy on it. So let's go back to the infrastructure section to first configure the OIDC policy for your dev portal. So there's quite a lot of fields we have to fill in here. I've already created an application on Auth0 called ACM Dev Portal. So I'll just be filling in the application name, the client ID, client secret, and some endpoints which can be obtained from Auth0. That's the authorization URL, followed by the token URL, user info URL, and the key set URL. The logoff URL is just that. This is specific to auth0. Save and submit. So that's the OIDC policy applied on the dev portal. The second bit is to configure an API with the API key policy. I will take this chance to showcase how an API spec can be updated as well. Here I'll be pushing a new version of the API spec. Save. And here I'll add a proxy, which is mostly identical to the one created previously, but this time referencing the newer API documentation. The host names all stay the same. You can see my new API spec had the version 2.0 inside, and that's reflected here. I will also be publishing this API to the dev portal. Edit advanced configuration, do the same thing on the routing. And in policies, I want to add the API key policy. So here I will be providing, I'm expected to provide an API key in the form of a HTTP header called API key. You can specify API keys here if you like, but I will not be doing that. The other thing for the try it now feature on the dev portal to work is to configure a cross-origin resource sharing policy, allowing the API key header. Save and publish. Now, if I go back to my dev portal, the first change I'll see is I now have a login button here because of the OIDC policy that I've configured. You can see it's redirected me to the auth0 login page. Put in my details. So now I'm logged in as my own user account. Go to APIs. There is now a new version of the API, version 2, with some additional endpoints. You see that there's a new Try It Now tab here. First thing you need is an API credential, which we can create by going to the app credentials page. In here, we can see we can create a new organization. It's called 5org. Within the organization, you can create a unique API key for every application that we're calling the API. In this case, let's call the app demo app, and we'll select the API that this app will be calling. This creates an API key for that app specifically. When you go back to the APIs and select the right version, API 2, version 2, sorry, hit Try It Now. I can now select the credential that was just created. And when I hit send, you see the response appear below here. So that concludes the video. I hope that gives you a good idea of how the workflow for ACM looks like for the various personas involved, the infrastructure team, the API owners, as well as your API clients or users.